North Bend. Coos Bay Council and Urban Renewal Work Session. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If our meeting ends early enough, you can go to both. How's that? North Bend's meeting's tonight also. So the first item on the agenda is public comments. First of all, I want to mention that this is a work session, so we will not be taking any action tonight. We're just going to be discussing some items that are on the agenda, a couple of them, and anything you may bring forth. Anyway, so public comment, this is the time to come up and make a comment about something, preferably that's not on the agenda, because when we get to the agenda, there's some items, Eric, I see that you want to speak to the bicycle situation, and so I prefer you do it at that time, okay? All right, Rob Taylor, you're first.
Rob Taylor from Bandon, Oregon. Mr. Mayor, councilors, I always keep an eye on all the city council meetings and the minutes that get sent out and the agendas that get sent out. And there was an agenda sent out, and I'm not sure if it was for the 18th or the meeting before that, but it had the flag policy on it. We were supposed to discuss that. So I sent off to Nicole, who's, by the way, wonderful. She's credible, great, responds right away. And she said, we have taken it off because we wanted to wait till the 25th when we had all the councilors there. And so I waited, and then I saw the next agenda meeting for the 18th, and there was no flag policy meeting on there. So I thought, well, maybe it is on the 25th. But I did notice there was a proclamation for the Indian tribes, and you guys were going to hang their flags on the boardwalk, which to me indicated that you're either going with the same old flag policy or for some other reason you're going with that. And so I wanted to come up here to find out and clarify what was going on with the tribe. And by the way, I think it's a great idea. It's educational. It's a good thing to do. But once again, I go back to inclusivity. If we're going to be inclusive, we should include everyone, and that would be like the Christian flag and the Gadsden flag. And so that's why I'm just here to find out, if someone could answer my question. I know it's not a back and forth, but maybe after I respond and after public comment, you can let me know where we are with that, because I'd like to have that discussion on the flag policy, because as far as I left it, we were unresolved. Thank you.
So yeah, you are correct. And so the flag policy has been postponed. We went from one date, as you said, to another. Specifically, it was for myself. I'm dealing with some health issues in a family member, and I'm out of town frequently, or here lately. And so the same thing with November. There's going to be some surgery. It's going to be postponed. I would like to be here. I think it's an important item that the full council should be here. So I postponed it at the last meeting for 60 days. I don't think it'll take that long. I imagine in December we'll bring it up. So we will discuss the flag policy. I'm not sure where it'll go, Rob. I mean, it's up for the council to decide. I know where I lie, but it's totally up to the council to decide what's going on. So the tribal flags they're a country, and we're handling that a little bit differently. So just like our American flags, until the flag policy is decided, what will be up there are the United States flag, the American flag, and then we'll put up the tribal flags. But those will be the only flags flying until a decision is made on the flag policy. So I hope that answers your question.
It did, beautifully.
Okay, all right.
Mr.
Now
Mayor,
go ahead.
also, that decision to put up the tribal flags, that was made long ago, probably about 6 months ago, and then it was asking the tribes for their flags. So, and just for your edification, you probably already know this, we are in the ancestral homelands of the 3 federally recognized tribes, and so as a council, we had made the decision, because they are federally recognized, that we wanted to put those flags up on the boardwalk along with the American flag.
I assumed it was an annual the
Sure.
past years, but I thought maybe it was just something annually, but it sounds like something new that, like I said, I totally support that.
Okay. Yeah, and truthfully, I mean, we intended to address it, just some things came up, and mainly it was me that it was affecting, and I just wanted to be here. So that's where we're at, but we will be addressing it, and we won't be hanging any of the flags up until it's decided what the policy is, okay? All right, so I have a couple for the bike. Ryan, did you want to talk now, or you want to talk about when we have the bike issue coming up? Okay. So is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to another item besides anything on the agenda? All right. If you decide to change your mind later on, we can get into that. Okay. First item on the agenda this evening is Jennifer. You're going to be handling this?
I am.
Okay. It's about some potential. It's been directed to whether or not to investigate further the implementation of bicycle facilities to connect the downtown area to Minks Park. And Jennifer will be handling it. Sorry, there you are. You're usually in front of me, so I can't find you. All right. Could you go ahead,
Keeping
please?
you on your toes. Okay, well, tonight we're going to discuss sharrows. We have some talking points that we'd like to share. We're going to discuss what are sharrows. We're going to talk about design considerations for sharrows. We're going to briefly look at the bicycle section from the 2020-2040 Transportation System Plan. And then we're going to go over a sharrow proposal that we received from Front Street Community Bike Works. Okay. So before we talk about what a sharrow is, you probably should talk about what it's not. So it's not a bike lane. A sharrow is meant to be used in situations where cyclists and drivers must coexist. So these are just general guidelines. Typically, they should be on slow-moving streets, neighborhood and local streets, and streets with a speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less. The sharrow is also a position tool. It shows the cyclists where to ride. Their cyclists are safe from flung open car doors, and they're safe from vehicles passing too closely. A sharrow also conveys information. It helps cyclists stick to recommended bike routes. It helps cyclists avoid wrong-way riding, and it alerts drivers of likely presence of bikes. So this next question was a little hard to answer. Do sharrows work? There's a lot of different opinions out there, so what I tried to do is tease out the ones where they weren't so subjective. So they're easy to install. And we can talk about that more here in a little bit. They don't require extra paving or remove parking spaces for cars. But sharrows do not bring the same safe space that a bike lane has, and it's important to install sharrows on wide streets with low speed limits and traffic volumes. So I wanted to just briefly talk about information that is in our existing Coos Bay Transportation System Plan. It is from 2020 to 2040, and it states a bicycle is an affordable and accessible mode of transportation. A bicycle promotes an active lifestyle. Bicycling does not expend fossil fuels. People ride bikes for all sorts of reasons. Just a few of them are to get to work, run errands, joy of riding, and exercise. In the TSP, there was 3 figures that I wanted to pull out, and we're going to show them up here. And for the audience, I'm sorry, they may not come up as big as I would have liked. For council, I did provide hard copies of the exhibits. So figure 8 shows our existing network. And what I did is I focused on the area that was, that corresponded to the area that Bike Works presented to us. Figure 9 shows a bicycle level of traffic stress. So what is that? That is, it measures the effect of traffic-based stress on bicycles by quantifying the perceived comfort levels a bicycle experiences. So green is minimal traffic stress, and then goes all the way up to red, which is high traffic stress. And then the last figure that we're going to look at shows proposed bike routes. So with any plan, there's always proposed facilities that we can install. And they break those up into 3 different types. Type 1 is a bike lane facility with like a physical or striped barrier. Type 2 is a bike lane that's typically 5 feet in width. And then type 3 is a sharrow for all intents and purposes. So here's figure 8, and again, I'm sorry, it's a little on the small side. But as you can see in the study area, The existing bike facilities we have there is along 101, south of Anderson, and then along Ocean Boulevard, just north of the intersection with Central. And those are the solid green lines. Figure 9 talks about that bike stress, let's see, bike level of traffic stress. So in our study area, you can see there's no green. There is some blue, and then there is some orange. And then the last figure is figure 10. And these are the proposed bike facilities. So the dark green lines, again, we talked about, those are the existing routes. The dashed green lines are the type 2, those are just dedicated bike lanes. And then I guess it's a pink or a magenta color. Those are the sharrows. So, as we stated earlier, Front Street Community Bike Works presented a plan to us. They presented a plan that would connect the downtown area to Mingus Park. And a portion of this was identified in our current TSP. Here it is. It's the red route. The stars are where they're proposing the sharrows. So it's a type 3 bike facility. For the most part, I think they have low speeds, but not necessarily low traffic volume, specifically along Commercial. So the 2 lanes along Commercial may make sharrows safer, but that should be determined by a traffic engineer. Some more items to consider about the proposal. It appears to meet the guidelines for when to use sharrows, but again, we'd like that to be formally approved by a traffic engineer. We would recommend a few additional sharrows and some advanced warning signage that wasn't shown on the plan, and we also would want to see a route installed to get them from Mingus back to downtown. So I know that I probably will be asked about budget, so I wanted to give you something to consider. This is very draft. It's based on an ODOC document that didn't have a date, but it was, we felt it was more recent based on our experience. And so this assumes the bike route there and back. And so we doubled everything. So we assumed 26 sharrows, 10 advanced warning signs. We wanted that transportation engineer review and approval. We added a 15% contingency. So assuming staff would install these sharrows and signage, we came up with an estimate of approximately $32,000. So our budget has capital funds for bike and pedestrian paths. It's Fund 45. Typically, these funds, though, are utilized for sidewalks and ADA improvements outside the URA. So that's what I have to get you guys all up to speed on sharrows, and I can answer any questions, and we have Eric here as well.
Before I get some public comments on this, so this is, as you stated, one way. It's not a return lane. So this 32,000 doesn't include a return route.
So their proposal was only one way. We doubled it to make it, to do an approximate to bring it back. So that cost estimate does, for the best of our knowledge, without looking at it and moving forward too far, that's an approximate cost estimate to get you there and back.
But you haven't decided the return route yet.
We haven't. So again, it's very rough, very draft.
Okay.
Because you couldn't necessarily follow because there are one-way streets,
Correct.
which return would probably take them down another busy.
Well, if we go back to figure 10, so if you look on there, so Mingus Park there is at 10th. There's actually a proposed route that doesn't maybe take you back east along Central and then along Anderson. It actually takes you south on 10th to, you guys, can you see what street that is?
Elrod?
I think it might be, yes.
Yeah.
It's like Elrod.
So there has been something preliminary planned.
Jennifer, how much how much money, or Nicole, how much money do we have in Fund 45?
So Fund 45 is kind of a big pot of money from a bunch of different sources. Bike Ped Path is about $130,000 as of the end of September. I'm not certain if there are some projects that we might have already in line for some sidewalk work, because that's typically what we would put in there, even some other types of ped paths. but that's what we currently have as far as
Correct.
cash.
So just to be clear, there's 130K essentially in that fund, and we haven't spent any of those monies yet, is that correct?
Correct, as of the end of September.
Okay, great,
Would
thank
that be
you.
used on existing areas, because we do have some painted areas that are dedicated to bike lane? Is it a potential that we may need some funds for maintenance of those areas?
Yes.
I mean, that's essentially the small portion that we use of the gas tax fund, which we're required to do, transfer over that. And that's intended to cover bike ped path throughout the city. So, those are capital maintenance kind of costs. It's potentially, using those dollars would prevent some of those other projects to happen, but.
But before we do anything or move forward with this, we've had to get a traffic engineer to determine the viability of this, correct?
That's staff's recommendation,
And what was the cost on the traffic engineer?
$3,000.
Okay. All right. Any more council comments before I open public comment? All right, public comments on this?
I'd
Oh.
just like to say, I'd like to,
Oh, Carmen, I'm sorry. I didn't see you up.
yeah, I'd like to just weigh in that I would like to see us move forward with the traffic engineering to see if this is viable. So this seems like a great concept. I ride my bike downtown quite a bit, and I think this paired with maybe a little bit of bike/traffic safety presentation that would come through, maybe even on the Friday update, would be helpful. I know that when I'm riding my bike, people often treat me as a pedestrian instead of more like a vehicle when I'm riding on the road, and that can actually be quite dangerous. So, yeah, I'm all for moving forward and seeing what kind of routes make sense and what they come up with, and maybe doing some informational, just getting information out to the public, out to our community about Sharrows and biking in general.
So Carmen, how do you feel about commercial as as one of the routes for the Sharrows?
I've ridden on commercial. It's fine in my opinion.
Okay.
101 is the worst. There's not much shoulder, and there's parking along the side, so it can be a little sketchy if people don't see you opening their doors or whatever. And then just the debris on the side of the road and the constant repatching makes it pretty uneven. So if you're riding on a road bike, it's a little rough, but if you have a more aggressive tire, it's not as bad. And then the proposed return route makes quite a bit of sense. I think going all the way down to Elrod I think it would work just fine, but 4th Street down to Curtis and getting you across there works pretty well, or just Anderson itself works pretty well. But a traffic engineer will have lots of opinions, so I'd defer to them.
Okay. So Jennifer, will the traffic engineer just do the analysis on the routes that we're talking about, or are they going to look at other routes?
Well, they can do whatever we want, but the estimate was for just the routes we're talking about.
Okay.
It looks like a couple of the proposed routes terminate into North Bend and county land. Have we had any talks with them about this? 'Cause it would kind of be inconvenient if the symbol showed they could keep going down the middle of the road and then they hit the next town and they can't.
We haven't had any discussions yet.
Yeah.
Good point, Drew.
The maps from the TSP, though, were coordinated with North Bend.
Cool. Okay. Public comments. Who would like to go first? Go ahead. Come on up. Just give your name and what town you reside in, please.
Okay, hello, my name's Eric Clough, I live in Coos Bay,
Uh-huh.
and I thought I would give you a little bit of background, because you've already kind of delved into some tricky issues, I think, with this. But I want to say, first of all, thank you to the leadership and the council and the staff for pursuing this. Front Street Community Bike Works, myself, and everybody involved in the cycling community in Coos Bay, we really do believe this is worthy of your time and effort. It's a missing piece of infrastructure, I think. It's in the transportation system plan, as was pointed out, and I think it's really, we all feel it's really time to move forward with some things. What we proposed was intended to be really simple, low cost, and easy to implement. However, that's not, it's not that easy because, as you've already pointed out, there are some significant questions to address in terms of traffic flow. In my own mind, as an everyday cyclist, it seems pretty straightforward to go on Market Street and the rest of the route. But once you're on Commercial, you know, that's, as Jennifer said, it's a high volume, if not high speed street. So it's busy, and people do drive fast, actually. Not everybody's driving 25 miles an hour on that street. So there are some questions, and I'm very interested to know who your traffic engineer is, and I'm also wanted to make a commitment on behalf of myself and anybody associated with Front Street Community Bike Works that we would be productive supporters and like to be involved in any planning you have in that regard. Because we're riders, we're cyclists, we ride around the town, we have ideas about what might be good routes. But of course, some planning in an official sense is worthwhile. And I also want to say that I think whoever your traffic engineer is should certainly be somebody, if they're looking at cycling infrastructure, should certainly be somebody who has some experience doing cycling infrastructure engineering. Right, if it's somebody who's never done anything like that, then I don't think that's appropriate. So I would just put our organization and myself out there as always willing to be productive contacts and supporters, consultants, if you will, for anything that you might have questions about. So yeah, we just intended this to be a first step. It is a one-way route, and again, it's because of some of these one-way streets. The route could come back on Anderson, but again, that's a pretty busy, high-flow street. You know, ideally, we would have some of these level 3 infrastructures where you might go when you put your little kid on the back, right? Or you're with your family. You know, I can ride down Anderson and I can ride down Commercial. That's not, I'm not too intimidated by that, although I do take my life in my hands at times. But honestly, if you're with kids or not such an aggressive rider, you're not going to want to go on Commercial Street. You want a dedicated, isolated lane as described in the TSP. So that's the gold standard. Maybe there's opportunities for some of those around the city. And I think that's all I have. Thanks. That's great.
Thank you, Eric. So Jennifer, to Eric's point, do we know who the engineer would be, traffic engineer?
We would use, the
We
one
go
we
out for an
typically use,
RFQ?
Southern Oregon Transportation Engineering, and I can get her resume for bike facilities.
Okay, and then do we intend to have the engineer, maybe the traffic engineer, do some interviews with these individuals like Carmen and Eric to get their input?
We can certainly add that to our scope.
Okay, great. Brian?
Hello, my name is Ryan Tuss. I live here in Coos Bay, and I'm here to support the implementation of official bike routes and I'm excited that the city is seriously considering a project that connects Front Street with Mingus Park. By promoting alternative modes of transportation, the city is sending a message to visitors that Coos Bay is more than a drive-through community, but rather a wonderful place to stop and explore. We also value safety, health, and quality of life for our citizens. Thank you for taking the time to consider projects like the one being presented tonight. Here's to biking in the Bay.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to this topic? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I live in Coos Bay. I also work with Eric at Front Street Community Bike Works. I just want to second what Eric said, that I do believe that our organization will be really instrumental in helping plan this out and giving feedback to any plan that happens in the future. I also just want to say that even beyond the safety considerations, like Sharrows help create a culture of cycling and allow people to realize that cyclists have the right to use the road just like everyone else does. So even beyond the safety considerations, I think we have to look at a culture change and a different culture in how people, transport in Coos Bay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Robert Moore, Coos Bay. I just have a concern with Elrod being a return route. It's on the edge of my neighborhood. I drive it a lot. From 5th Street up to 10th Street, it's a very narrow residential street with parking on both sides. I guess I don't see how a bike lane fits on that street.
So, it's specifically not a bike lane. It's a little bit different from what I understand.
But are you going to displace the parking?
No.
No.
Oh,
No.
all right.
All right,
I guess I need to see the plan.
okay. Am I correct on that? We're not displacing the parking. It's going to be on the road, showing that this is a potential bike area lane?
It's going to be a
or route?
Sharrow
Am I
facility,
right?
yes, type
Okay.
3.
Okay.
Don't see how it will fit.
Well, they have to commingle, is my understanding
They're in
from
the
reading
same
this.
lane as a vehicle.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the share part.
correct. All right, anyone else on this topic? All right, we'll close the public hearing. So, you need direction from us, is that correct?
Correct.
So, we have Carmen, Counselor Matthews has suggested that we get the traffic engineer to evaluate this route. I would concur. I'm not sure everyone else feels. The only thing that I have reservations about, that we're being specific to this route, and I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, I think maybe it needs to be, maybe after there's some discussion with the individuals, then maybe we might want to consider other routes, because I'm not sure these are going to be the best route. We're limiting the engineer to specifics.
Well, if you could like, I can get a scope of work, and then I can present it at a regularly scheduled council meeting, and we can have a discussion there.
Okay.
Okay.
Carmen, how you feel about that?
Yeah, I like that. Jennifer, when you're talking about the scope of work, are you talking about maybe getting some input from Front Street Community Bike Works and various people amongst the community to kind of build that scope, or where are you getting that scope?
Well, I actually thought we'd start with the transportation engineer, and in that scope would include reaching out to yourself as well as to Bike Works.
Okay.
But
I just figured it would flip-flop and we'd have the engineer look and see if it was feasible within the routes that we had input from the community on. But I could go the other way too.
Jennifer, just for clarification, when we're talking about a scope of work, Carmen, you can tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth. I think that really you're not just going to look at these two routes. That scope of work is going to include alternate routes, and then we will communicate with the biking community as well as the transportation engineer. Is that correct?
yes, we can have like 3 alternate routes based on conversations with Bike Works.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like the idea of putting this out. One of the things I see in here that I have mixed feelings about is there's a section indicated going near Marshfield for the in-road traffic, I think. That could have interesting effects. I mean, there's a safety concern, but there's also, the community tells us frequently in that area that people are going too fast.
I guess
If you had bicyclists
I'm
going down
confused.
that, it could be an organic slower of traffic.
Yeah, if
I'm
I
As
just-
long as
understand-
everyone's
I thought we
safe.
were looking at a
Yeah, I think
specific
this-
route. You're looking at the plan.
Yeah.
Which is much broader. The
Oh.
the Sharrow plan is much more narrow, and they're looking at expanding that a little bit for some alternate routes. This is just to get it started.
Never mind.
So this is going to be from Front Street, so for clarification, from Front Street to Mingus Park, and then a return route, which is undecided at this time. Correct? Okay.
Correct.
All righty. Well, anyone else on the council? So we agree that we're going to move forward and get a traffic engineer and get a scope of work, get an RFQ, and then do some, once that's done, we'll get some interaction with some of the public on this that ride bikes. I think what's been mentioned is, we're at a point that a culture change is at a, we need to think about. And this is something we haven't done, and it's something new for us. So I know it's hard for us to come up with an adaptation and take this step, but I think it's important for us to take that first step. So I think it's great. I also want to mention that we have a bike repair at the information center. I don't know if you're aware of it, right? And so if they can't make it to your shop, they can stop there and then get to your shop. Anyway, here you go. Travel Southern Oregon Coast has been putting these up and down in different places in different cities. And so it's just a small bike repair, some tools and stuff like that. So anyway, we do support it in a small way, and we just need to look at expanding it.
I think we also need to remember, oh, sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think it hurts to look at it. I am concerned about intermingling larger vehicles with bicycles. I mean, I grew up in downtown. I rode my bike everywhere, all over downtown, but it was a long time ago. And I think, it's definitely worth taking a look at. I am concerned on some of the more narrow roads that we're going to be impeding traffic, and so I would like to look at that. Because I think, roads are designed to move people around, whether they're on a bicycle or they're in a vehicle. But a bicycle is no match to a vehicle, and I want to make sure that we're safe in how we
I would argue that that's why this is so important, though.
Exactly.
Because people are riding their bikes in unsafe situations right now, because we don't have
Well,
bike
and that's what I'm saying.
infrastructure.
I think we need to look at it, but I also think we need to be careful as well as we implement that.
And Councillor Kilmer, the only thing I was going to add to that is I love, first and foremost, we're doing this for the citizens of the community, but there is economic development in this. There are a lot of biking tours. We've seen a number of groups at the casino, and sitting on the Travel Oregon Commission, biking brings a lot of money to communities, and so the fact that we're taking a look at this, not only for the citizens, ultimately I think will benefit with tourism, and everyone knows I love to talk about tourism, so I think it's good for the community.
Well, and that was the other part that I forgot to mention is, I think it's important for the Downtown Association to also weigh in on this, because if we can slow traffic, no matter what it is, vehicles or bicycles or whatever, then they are more likely to stop and visit our businesses in downtown as well.
Jennifer, is it possible to maybe get some examples of this in other cities and how it impacted them?
We can. Charleston implemented it on the Boat Basin Road.
And I'm sure Eugene and Springfield both have quite a few bike routes.
I've seen these in Eugene. a
No,
lot.
just bike. They don't have Dishes, they have bike routes and lanes, but they might have some of this that's available in some of the parks.
But you say that Charleston has a Sharo?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just
any
add
other-
that on figure 10, I'm so thrilled to see the future type 2 striped connecting the existing type 2 striped on Ocean Boulevard. I think that this street is extremely dangerous and is such a connector for downtown into Empire. And I mean, maybe that's phase 2, but excited to see that for the future.
I agree. I know we have part of the bike lanes on Ocean, but not completely out there, so that might be another step down the road. Okay, anyone else?
I'd just like to chime in on that a little bit. Speaking to Stephanie's point, yeah, there's some sketchy spots where people are already riding their bikes, and it's definitely dangerous. So it'd be nice to highlight the fact that there is a collaborative modes of transportation going through some of these scarier, tighter spots. And if any of the counselors or the community are interested in a little road trip, I was recently in Ashland and got stuck there because my car had some issues and I had to ride my bike to the auto parts store. And luckily, Ashland has an extensive network of dedicated bike paths and sharrows that allow you to pretty much get anywhere throughout their city. And I have to say, it was absolutely amazing. It was, for me, something that was extremely attractive and something I would love to see developed in some way, shape, or form in Coos Bay. It just really made everything so much more accessible and healthy and fun. So if you happen to find yourself in Ashland, maybe either rent a bike or bring a bike and check it out. It's pretty amazing.
Okay. Good comments by everyone. Thank you. All right. If there are anyone else, hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda. So continued discussion regarding possible next steps towards the new library facility. Who's going to handle this? Sorry, out there.
I have the privilege of handling
You have the
this
privilege,
in Roger's
okay.
absence.
And so you have it all figured out for us, I hope?
I would not at all suggest such a thing as that.
Okay.
We do have several people in attendance tonight who have walked this path, so there's probably a little bit more expertise here than what you might hear from me. So I think in all things, when we are in a long-term kind of planning thing, it's always good to maybe recap, because what I'm recognizing is that we've been talking about this for a long time. We often find there's a couple folks along the way who weren't at those meetings, so we're going to give just hopefully a quick recap. We started these conversations about where that library should potentially move when we discovered in 2014 that there were some structural challenges with that building. Moving from that, council created a library steering committee just to be kind of a sounding board to focus efforts. That happened towards the end of 2014 and 2015. We walked through the process of creating a strategic plan. Further in 2015, we worked with Hacker to develop a needs assessment for what a new facility might look like. The Library Steering Committee has, throughout this whole time, been looking for locations throughout the city, focusing obviously in downtown. That's where the library's at. That's where the interest has been. Unfortunately, as we all know, we were unable to find a location, and so we started widening the search. It resulted us purchasing the property on Ocean Boulevard in 2018. In 2019, we worked with a firm to look at funding feasibility. And from that, the idea of a general obligation bond came to the surface. That process started with those discussions on how to kind of stage that bonding question, and initial thoughts were we would put that on the ballot in November of 2021. It actually was pushed out into 2022. In 2021, we began looking at another option, and that's the John Toppitz Park location. And in March, that location was approved by council. We had put in 2021 a funding request with the state legislature to help support the construction of a new facility, and we learned in July that that was not going to be approved. And so we continued walking forward with looking for other funding sources. July 2021, we finally decided on the moving forward with the bond, pushing it to the May 22 election. From that point, we then began looking to kind of aid in the educational campaign for a Toppitz Park location, working with Hacker to develop a design, kind of help to give a vision to what that library might look like. Moving into 2022, we began really focusing on the verbiage and what we would want to put on the ballot. Pushing that forward to the ballot, we know at this point in time that it didn't pass. What we also know from that process is out of the number of voters we have in this community, not a lot of people voted in that election. So we have an opportunity to maybe do a little bit more education. So when we look back from 2014 till today, we looked at 15 different possible sites throughout the city. A lot of work was put into vetting those sites. And recently the Library Steering Committee has met and trying to figure out what next steps might look like. Their recommendation is to look at a community poll. And then we would also, from that recommendation, also want to potentially look at the cost estimates for some other sites, maybe in downtown. You know, we kind of have an idea what that Toppets Park cost estimate might look like. So doing something similar on a very broad scale for a downtown location, not determined just yet. And then, you know, let's pick something in the middle between Empire and downtown and maybe do a cost estimate there. And we can use those data sets maybe for this polling, community polling option. So tonight we're kind of hoping to discuss this a little bit and then get a consensus of what you would like to do with that recommendation.
Okay, so we can take a few council comments and you can ask staff anything, and then we'll open the public comments. I just want to start, first of all, to say that this started before this council was seated and elected. This started in 2014, and theoretically it should have started before that. And so we were given the criteria or the obligation to do something about this. In 2016, when this council came on board, we were given 5 years to site a library and build it, because that's how much time we were told we had, which isn't much time. So, you know, I know that we get a lot of criticism, but I think that we were under certain circumstances that were really handed to us and should have theoretically been a lot further down the road by the time we got here. As you saw going through the scenario that Nicole stated, they were unable to find a site before they got to us. They tried and attempted to in 2015. I can also tell you that this council has no decision made of where this is going to go. I've heard comments saying that the council is going back to John Toppets. I heard the council saying they're going to be downtown. I've heard all kinds of things that we're going to do that I haven't been involved in, and I'm sure this council hasn't been involved in. We have not decided what to do. But I can tell you, as you all know, that we decided to go with John Toppets. The public did not support it. So now we have an obligation and a direction to try to figure something else out. What that is, it is unknown to me. And when I say everything's on the table, in my opinion, everything's on the table. And the two factors in my mind are location and cost. And so we have to determine how to balance that. And that's where we're at. I appreciate the steering committee and the library board for all the time and effort that they put into this. I appreciate the staff, all the time and effort they put into this, and money that's been allocated towards it. We made the best decision we thought at the time. But again, we here represent the voters. And so that's where we're at. They didn't like our suggestion, and that's fine. So we have to move on and decide where to go from there. But we have to kind of get an idea and a determination where to go. So that being the case.
Wait, I have a comment.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask Nicole, I think now we're looking, you made the comment that we're looking at maybe alternative sites somewhere in the middle, but at the time when this council made the decision to cite a library in Empire, a large part of that was state law saying that you could not build within a floodplain and you could not build within a tsunami inundation zone. So I think that's a really important point to make, because the law has changed. So we now have the ability to do so. Is that correct, Nicole?
That is correct, and that is something something shouldn't be omitted. Additionally, I think we should also kind of talk about that, a funding source to either purchase land needs to be either land we have, because that's a, non-cost to us, or it needs to be within the urban renewal zone. And so when we looked at those initial areas, downtown and Empire were our options. And the middle ground is not an option if we look to urban renewal, so.
That's a good point.
And to build in the floodplain and inundation zone for the tsunami in downtown, there'd be an extra cost, a significant extra cost. You'd have to raise up the property, and a lot of people say, well, Coos Bay Village, look what they did. Well, they raised it 14 feet. So if we do that downtown also, we have to be careful, if we were to raise something 14 feet, how we impact the surrounding properties. We can't impact them in a negative way, because then the water would run off and potentially cause them an issue. So we can't do that. So we got to think about something else. In my mind, if we did something downtown, we might almost have to think about something like this building that's elevated up. But these are just my thoughts, and believe me, it's my thoughts. It's not 1 out of 7 up here, so there's a lot of other things going on. And plus, like I said again, it's really going to determine the citizens' feeling, and that's what we're trying to determine before we go out. But we're running out of time, and so that's kind of an important factor that we're having to deal with.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's, oh, sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that the poll is where we need to start, because I wouldn't go 100% saying that the voters 100% did not like John Toppet's Park. I think funding came into the issue as well.
Oh, that's why I said Stephanie, funding and
I
location.
think the poll is going to be critical to determining the direction we're headed. I still maintain that I have a hard time putting something downtown that may not, may suffer consequences farther down the road. We're not putting this in temporarily. This library that's been in existence has been here for a long time. We want it to last a long time. But how we do that and the cost is important. And I think the poll needs to be spread out really well across the community, all parts of the community, east side, downtown, and Empire.
I think it's also important as we look at locations, one of the struggles that came up when we talked about where to put the library is some folks kept indicating, well, why aren't we putting it in Coos Bay? I think it's important that the public and all individuals remember Empire is approximately 1/2 of Coos Bay's population. It is a major chunk of the city. Even if it's not located downtown, it is 1/2 the population of the total city, concentrated.
Yeah, and to Stephanie's point, I think I want to see that survey. I want to make sure, because this is our one opportunity to decide, was it cost? Was it because John Toppet's Park is in Empire? Was it because it was John Toppet's? Had we bought the Gussie's property, would they, would it have still? I think we need to have a number of different alternatives in that survey to try to clearly understand what our next steps are. So I couldn't agree more with Councillor Kilmer, just making sure that we're very, very thoughtful on those questions asked.
Nicole, when it comes to urban renewal district, the Empire District and the Coos Bay District, we were able to expand the Empire District primarily because we were bringing in city land, so it had no effect on the taxing districts, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the difference between the two districts, urban renewal is a kind of complicated subject anyways, but the downtown area has a special levy, which gives us roughly $300,000, a little bit over that a year, which you guys have dedicated to streets in this area. That's another funding source that helps out in our challenged keeping up with the street maintenance. We don't have that issue in Empire, so expanding it in meeting the rules, you can only expand by a certain amount, or we weren't going to lose that special levy out there. So it made good sense to expand it out there. Again, you noted it didn't affect any taxing districts because it was already non-taxable land. That's not the scenario in downtown. If we were to expand in downtown, we potentially would be jeopardizing those funds we get from special levy.
So just to make it clear, there are two different urban renewal districts. There's one downtown and there's one in Empire. And expanding downtown, as has been suggested, is not really necessarily an option, because you do have to get permission from the taxing districts that are affected by that.
Yeah, so you would have to in both. So the rules of urban renewal, if we were to expand the downtown district by greater than 1% of the initial land area designated, then we lose that special levy. We become a permanent rate plan, and that's what Empire is. We lost that, I believe, in the Newmark. We added that little cherry stem of Newmark back several years ago. So we don't have special levy option out there, which wasn't a concern at the time for that plan. So we are a permanent rate plan out in Empire, and we have the capacity for special levy still in downtown.
But for clarification also, you can expand it like you did in Empire, but you can only expand it so much. Even if we were to do that downtown, we can expand it only so much. Sometimes it's perceived that we can just expand it wherever, but that's not the case.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I think we've cleared everything up, right? It's just crystal clear. So that being the case, let's take some public comment, and then we can get back to council comments or some staff, and maybe we can get some idea on what's being suggested is that we go out and do a more in-depth and thorough poll. And so the idea is to try to hone in what we need to concentrate on and before we make a decision. So that's the discussion where we're at tonight. So anyway, who's first? I know there's many out there just chomping at the bit, so.
Well, we've got some library supporters over on this side. We should let them go first.
Okay, whoever, it doesn't matter to me. We can just stop the discussion if no public.
You guys have me at a major disadvantage because Tuesday is like the worst day for me. This is like about an 18-hour day. All right, so here we go. You guys are the mayor and the city council. A city of 16,000 people gave you a ton of authority and a ton of responsibility. And one of those authorities is to execute eminent domain for the public good, okay? Libraries are important. Police substations are important. Communication centers are important. Sewer pump stations are important, all right? And one of the things we did by voting you into office is saying you're speaking for us, what's important. So telling me the community doesn't want me to exercise eminent domain, no, we already gave you that authority when we voted you into office, okay? And it's a big responsibility. You don't take it lightly. None of you guys take any of your responsibilities lightly. I mentioned to you the last time I came up and talked to you about 2 planning development directors, 2 of some sort of planning administrator. February 2014, before almost all of you were in office, that library blew up, sunk into the ground, started costing bucket loads of money, roof leaked like a sieve, and we're now at 2022, and we're not any farther than we were in 2014. And one of the reasons is we're short on the planning end of stuff. So in the long range thinking, picking up another community development or planning person so things don't drag forever, probably be a great idea. I don't agree with some of your conclusions about polling. I think that that library had been anywhere else in this city, even at $20 million, it would have passed. That park is that important. I haven't seen Stephanie in that park. I've seen Rob in that park. I've seen Joe in that park. Joe doesn't even live on that side of town.
1 minute.
I've seen Lucinda in that park more times than I care to remember. Okay.
I know you mean that in the
Nicole,
kindest of ways,
same
Jim.
thing. Okay. I don't bother you in the park because you're getting away from it all. Okay, but I see you. I honestly think that was the issue. So the question is eminent domain or not, but find some place to put it. And either one of the parks is no. You would have got crushed if it went in Mingus. Crushed. Okay, you had had your voter turnout. It had been no. All right. So it needs to be done. Needs to be done fairly swiftly. I think Mr. Moore mentioned, he mentioned at one of the community meetings, a spot up Ocean, which is the logging access road to the water board, and we own that piece of property there. That's another one to look at. Finally, in crossing T's and dotting I's for 13 sites or 15 sites, a letter from the Archdiocese of Portland saying they aren't going to sell their church would probably be a nice thing to have in your pocket, because they're above the floodplain. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things that the poll, I would hope, determine is just what James has stated, whether it would be, that might not be or something that's available to think about. So anyway, that's what we're talking about. We're going out trying to do an analysis and determine that. So who's next? Wow, quiet group. Steve, come on up.
Steve Skinner, 2310 Lombard, North Bend, but I'm a great park user, as you all know. I've said a fair amount already. I did a pros and cons list on the Macaulay site. I know Roger hates that site, versus the park site, and Macaulay comes out hugely on the pro side, and the park comes out down here on the con side. I haven't shared it with you, but if anybody's interested, I can have that typed up and do it. As far as putting it in Empire, everybody knows I'm a huge Empire supporter and have been for a long time. I think there's a lot of merit to that. I would like to see it near the Y to benefit people on East Side and so forth. At least they can just go straight out Ocean, and if the library's right there, it would lessen the burden of having to go across town. I think two interesting sites out there. We already know about Gussie's. It's got the lot next to it, so I think there's adequate room there. The second site that interests me in particular is the Cardinal site behind there. There is land there. The interesting thing about that for me, being a landscape gardener, etc., is that there's an exit entrance out of Toppets Park on Ackerman. Directly across the street from that is a wetlands corridor that is one of the wetlands that feeds into the creek there. There's another wetlands on the other side that is the other headwaters for that creek. So if you're talking about bike lanes and tourists and so forth and so on, to me it would be kind of cool to restore those wetlands. Make the way the creek is situated, I believe there's plenty of room to run a trail out to the bay along that creek, and that could be a part of the overall plan that would connect to Toppets Park, and then you have a really huge area for biking, hiking, walking, and so forth and so on. And you get kind of a good reputation for restoring some wetlands, which are becoming hugely critical with global warming. And you could tie the library into that site in a way that you could make kind of a civic statement, I think. And to me, it's worth looking at and exploring. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I would definitely be interested in your pros and cons on Macaulay Hospital site. So if you could email it to me, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I just think, I'm sure he would change his mind in a heartbeat if we can move, if you really have any interest in doing it. So I'll get that to you. Yeah.
All right, anyone else?
Mayor, the Library Steering Committee actually talked about the Cardinal site fairly in depth just a few days ago. I actually like that site as well. It's very, very big and plenty big enough for the library and other things. Unfortunately, the problem with that site is even using urban renewal funds, we don't have enough to finance that. Isn't that correct, Nicole?
Well, we're making some presumptions based on sales not known, what they would sell properties for, but yeah, that is our concern, is being able to purchase those multiple pieces in order to get to the size that we need. I believe we're looking at a 2-acre spot, so.
Yes.
My name is Charlotte Kepke. I live in the Empire District. One of my concerns, if you will, is when we talk about urban renewal, I hate to see, if the library figures are accurate for how much use there is of the library, I am concerned about moving that many people past Freddy's, past Safeway, past all the little down stores, everything else, making this trip past Walmart. People will go to Walmart because they want to go to Walmart. Why take our people from East Side and downtown and take them who might shop, the little stores downtown, the big stores downtown, and move them all past Walmart, coming and going? That's a concern to me. Urban renewal. Why gut the downtown area if there's that much use of the library to move it clear to Empire? I shop downtown. If the library was up in Empire, I probably wouldn't shop downtown as much as I do. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way. I would like to see the downtown urban renewal be urban renewed.
All right, thank you. All valid comments and points that we all thought about and need to reconsider. Who's next? I can always close a public hearing. No comments? I know all of you on the library have put in lots of information and time and still working on it, so I appreciate it. So your comments have probably already been made. So there being no more comments at this time, so council, do you agree? I think Stephanie started it out that it's important that we go ahead with a poll and try to get the right questions that we ask to make sure that we're addressing the concerns that have been brought up tonight and in other meetings and throughout. As Rob said, they had a library steering committee. I think that's important that we keep things open. I mean, if Cardinal property seems to be one that we think about, then I think we need to think about setting the cost aside and letting the voters determine if that's what they want to do. But again, it all determines the poll and the questions. And so where do we go from here? To determine who we hire? Is that what we're going to look at next?
So we're just really looking for consensus on moving forward with potentially looking at a poll. We have a couple of firms that we are aware of that does this kind of work. And then secondly, we are looking for consensus on developing some cost estimates for alternate sites. Not identified, so we're going to be kind of very generalized cost estimates.
So first, Nate, are we within our legalities or legal bounds to go ahead and hire a firm to do some polling for us? I mean, there was some concern before.
Advocating one way or the other, we're just informational, like it's perfectly legitimate.
Are we doing that, or was?
Who comes up with the questions?
Pardon?
Who's coming up with the questions?
The consultant.
I mean, I think we're going to have a group of people who are going to be involved in that process. I mean, we'll have a consultant, but we'll have staff and potentially we could have members of, council and, yeah.
Nicole,
So-
we would have an opportunity to review the survey, though, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm supportive of the process. I will say this. The Empire location, John Toppet's Park specifically, that decision was made in 3 weeks with this council. We had talked about the Ocean Boulevard site, and we changed our mind within 3 weeks. And I was concerned at the time that we were, I think Councilor Kilmer was too, that we had not thought of all the ramifications of that decision. And we sit here today. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but what I would caution this council whatever decision we make, I really, and I know that I know we're dealing with the time crunch, but we need to have the fullness of time to make the decision that's going to be best. So let's make sure we have all of our, T's crossed and our I's, you know what I'm trying to say, on the survey. And again, I just don't want us to make a knee-jerk reaction.
I agree with that, Councilor DeNovo. But I will also say that, as to the mayor's point, we're 3 years past the deadline that we originally had for a new library. And I really think, I support a poll, I think that's a great idea, but I really think we need to narrow this down to just a few sites, because we're all over the board and it just keeps making us take steps backwards, and I want to move forward, so.
The bottom line is you're not going to please everyone. We just have to, and that's where we were. We were at a situation where we had to move forward based on the timelines we were given, and I thought it was a good compromise. I was not in favor of the timeline to make a decision to change trajectory, really, honestly, the way we did it, but we had to move forward, and there was a lot of stuff that came in behind that looked really good. So I think the poll is going to give us a much needed view of where the majority stand.
I still think Toppets was the better choice, but it's not the way the vote turned out. So a poll is a good way to respond and see what the feedback is.
Sarah?
I agree.
Okay, Carmen?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see exactly what was the concerns, if it was money, if it was location, the combo, and what percentages those weighed on the population. As you know, I'm a parks person, and I was definitely in favor of the parks location and co-siting assets for the community on city property and park property, and getting that investment into the park system, which could have given us more more grant opportunities to completely uplift John Toppets and maybe fix some of the problems that are out there that exist in this current time. But I am just also going to say that I am listening, and I am not set in the original decision that I made. I want to get this library done. I want to move forward. I agree with Rob. We got to make this happen. But we really do have to take some real time, because spinning our wheels here is it's driving everybody crazy. I think, at least on the city council, I think we're all feeling it. And I know that the library steering board is having a real tough time with, we just got to find a solution. We got to find a way to go forward. And Stephanie, you nailed it. We're not going to make everybody feel like it's the right decision, but we need a majority. And I think the poll will help us get to that point, at least to give us the idea of the concerns that are really important to people. And it might come down to just cost. It just might come down to it's just too much money. And I don't know what to do with that kind of information. So that might be something else we think about, is just what does that mean if we just can't ask that much from our community? What does that turn into? And I realize that's just another question for us to ask ourselves, but I think the poll is essential, and we'll see what happens.
Do we know how large of a sample they're going to take on the polling? Because that will make a difference. I remember the cost when I did polling for ratings was pretty expensive, the higher the number of people that you polled, but I think it's important that we don't narrow this too tight to 200 in a community this size.
So I don't think we have cost estimates yet, but we do have names of firms who have done this. As an example, we are aware that Springfield, before they put anything on the ballot, they do a poll. And that's just their methodology. And so we have the folks that they've worked with, just as a starting point.
Okay, and then also the other part of that question is, to make sure that geographically, whoever is doing the polling understands the districting of our community so that they get a good cross-section.
Nicole, to Rob's point, I do agree, Rob. We can't just start from the beginning. So I guess my question is, if we're looking at some potential sites, it would be really great if we had those kind of nailed down before we went out and did this survey. And so that we could at least get more, support potentially from the survey saying, do you like this site or do you like this site? Is that realistic?
So the problem with that is that, we can narrow down an area, but we don't want to identify the property that we're looking at.
I'm cool with that. As long as it's an area, I'm totally cool with that.
So I agree. I don't think we should get too much in the weeds on specific locations because I think that makes it more difficult at this point. I think that would be the next step in my mind. But I'm hoping, I agree with Rob and Lucinda both saying, if we can't have all these sites, we have to be a little bit more problematic and narrow them down. So the first thing is area and just geographically area, I think we need to talk about. And so I support it, and I think we need to move forward. I've heard Carmen say, we need to get this done. I heard one counselor say, I really don't care where it's at, we just need a new library. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind. We all have personal feelings about this and where it should go or not go, but we're at a point that the vote didn't go like we expected it to, so we're back to square one, not completely, but we need to find out how to move forward in the next direction and kind of get an idea of where to go from a poll, all right? So you'll come back with, you're going out to speak to specific pollsters, and you'll come back with some data and information for the council, and then we'll go from there. And then whoever wants to be, I hope the library steering committee and some counselors will be involved in the questions, and then they'll be reviewed by the council, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So just to clarify, is the council on board with picking one area downtown, one in Empire, and one in between to get cost estimates for those for the poll?
That's a very good question.
Well, I think that's something I think should be discussed. I also think it depends on the poll, whoever we hire to do the poll, how they can interpret that into it.
I believe that is going to be part of the poll, though, is to have the cost estimates for each area.
But I don't think we'll know.
I think that's
Square foot. Here's the other thing that's going to come into play: square footage. Are we going to talk about square footage?
We're not considering. We're going with the flat rate for the building because we feel like it's going to be the same regardless of where it is.
Okay.
It's the cost of acquisition of the land, of developing the land, and that sort of thing.
And whether it's an urban renewal district or not, right?
Well, but you don't have enough funds for the Cardinal property. So I think that those are all these factors. So yes, I think, we need to determine, is cost even an issue for the voters? I would imagine some kind of cost is going to be an issue.
I think cost is an issue.
But I don't know how we're going to, maybe the architects can come up with a figure and say, okay, if it's out in Empire, it's going to cost you X. If it's downtown, it's going to cost you X. If it's not in these areas, then it's going to cost you X, I guess.
Or a better question, a better way to phrase the question is, how much would you be willing to spend?
Well, I think that actually puts us in a corner, Stephanie. It's do you want the library or don't you want the library? And we have to ask the question in it, which I think we are. Was the reason you voted against this because it was in the park? It's clear to me that we all love this conversation at this point.
I think it's great that we have these questions, but I think that we need to determine who we want to do the poll, and then we need to get their expertise on what questions to ask and in what fashion. Because, I don't know.
Well, there's quite a lot that can be inferred from a survey.
Right.
And you don't want to create a false hope either.
No,
It's
you're
only
right.
going to cost 18 million, but it's really going to cost 25 million. I think that does put us
Well, yeah, and definitely the way things have been going,
just
ask
make it more
anyone that is doing any kind of infrastructure. If your estimates are here, you think you put a contingency in here, and then it ends up being here.
Yeah, I just gave you an
It's-
example.
the-
Stephanie's
the
absolutely correct.
Costs are not going
yeah.
backwards. They're-
We just did a project at the airport that we were expecting to spend 6 million, came in at 9. So there's a perfect example.
I thought Bob had his hand up. Did you, Bob?
Yeah, I would just make one comment. I've been talking to a lot of people in the community about the library issue, and one of the things that has really risen to the top with these conversations is that people do not have any options. We have the Toppets Park option. That's the only option. And if we were to consider having a site downtown, it's worthless talking about that without saying what the price tag is. So I think that that's where the energy is coming from, is that if you want to have an effective poll, people need to know that the Toppets Park site, $20 million, the downtown site costs X. And yes, that's a rough estimate, but using the idea that the building we know will be approximately X amount of dollars, and that's pretty well crafted by the work that Hacker did. But we don't know what a downtown site would cost. We don't know what special codes we would have to, well, we know what the codes are. We haven't estimated the cost for implementing those codes. All of those additional factors that would come into a total package. Yes, it would be a rough estimate, but then if you have in a poll, you can present to people, this site is going to cost you $25 or $30 million, the Toppets Park is $20 million, and you're back to that question, what are you willing to pay? You know, then people really have an option that they don't have right now.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I have to attend another meeting, so I have to, I'm sorry.
Well, these are all good points, and I think they're all valid, and they're all to be considered, and I think they need to be thought about in the poll. And so however that can be crafted and put together. And so this will not be the last time that we have interjection into this. I don't know what else you need at this point from us.
I think I have a good feeling that you're interested in doing a poll, and we believe that we should have some price tags associated with potential other options. So I think you've covered what our needs were.
Yeah, you know, I like to get an opinion from the pollster. I mean, it's one thing to say it's going to cost more if it's downtown, but to specifics, because here's what I'm afraid of. If we come out and we say, would you be willing to pay $30 million for a facility downtown, and it comes in at 35, we are facing a problem, in my opinion. So I hate to get specific because I think it could cause us a problem. I'm not saying that we don't say it's going to cost more if it's downtown than whatever, because I believe it might. I don't know. I mean, if it's in the downtown area where, you know, the floodplain and the tsunami zone, then I know it would. If we get outside that area, then maybe not. And maybe we can find a spot, Collie Hospital, I'm just going to use that as an example, maybe that's outside the zone. So maybe it won't cost us as much. I don't know. Anyway.
I think if you're too general, if you're just saying downtown, Empire, there, that you're not going to get the answers you're looking for. Because, I mean, people are going to pick downtown most likely.
Well, then we
without
have one
price.
answer down. Really, Rob, then in my mind, even though I just said I want the fullness of time, let's get the poll put together, and if the answer is we want it in downtown, well, okay, they've told us what they want, right? And so now we have to find a place downtown. I guess maybe the most obvious question, and I apologize that I don't know the answer to this, can we just, as a potential option, now that the law has changed, can we simply just put the new library on the current, on the land that the current library is in? Obviously, it's going to be more expensive because we have to make sure that it can meet the floodplain regulations as well as meeting the tsunami inundation regulations.
Yeah, you could, easy.
Well, then why can't we do that? Everyone likes it where it's at.
Well, we don't know that, though.
Well, I think yes, you're right. I'm being opinionated. You're right.
Well, I mean, I think that's what we're going to do the poll for, to make that determination.
And I think location's only one of the,
Exactly.
one of the considerations. I do believe cost is a major concern as well.
But to answer my question, Nicole, could you answer that for me?
I'm going to attempt to provide you with a little bit of information which may get us to an answer. If we are going to use the current site, the question then becomes, where does the library sit in the interim? I mean, we're going to have to find a place for us to operate a facility while we don't have a facility there at that current site. And we don't have operational costs to rent somewhere. I mean, we've looked at those kind of as an option already. And I'd hate us to be in a position where we don't have a library for, say, 18 months, because
So-
it is a widely used facility. So I think,
I beg to differ a little bit, because I think that we could build on the backside, on 7th, right behind the church, and that lot, and even the street, and then get it built, and then take down the current library for parking. That would be a suggestion, if we decided on that. And I'm not saying that's the spot, but anyway.
so perhaps that can be a potential cost estimate scenario.
Sure, but it's still going to cost more than the Empire site, because you have to, in my opinion, now, I don't know, you'd have to raise it up similar to City Hall. And so I think when you do that, there's going to be a cost associated that would be more than the Empire site. I might be wrong, I'm not an architect and engineer, so I don't know.
Carmen's had his hand up for quite a while.
Oh, well, Carmen, you got this result for us?
The voice from above here. I think all of us would agree that the reason why we didn't want to put it downtown was because of the tsunami inundation zone. And I kind of wanted to share a few things, and hopefully this will make it into information provided in the poll. Flood insurance is really not great, and it requires you to rebuild in the same zone. And it won't cover we won't recoup much of our community's investment if there was a tsunami event that ruined our assets. I think we'd be in dire straits at that point, especially if we decided to relocate after said thing. I mean, this is all forward looking, but I think if we're going to put that kind of question, the option for downtown into the poll, we need to be clear with them about, we're spending all of the community's money, and it could be washed away, and that's it. We get nothing. That really scares me, and I'm not sure if everybody understands that. They like the idea of having it downtown. I think it's a great place to have it downtown. I utilize it downtown. It's an amazing location until something really bad happens, and I have 2 businesses in that zone, and if that comes, it's just done. And there won't be rebuilding in that zone. That would be kind of pointless, because there won't be anything down there, really. So I think the Empire Zone, for all the hindrances that it comes through with the community, Rob said it, a large portion of our city lives in Empire, and it needs to be looked at. And I think that needs to weigh heavily on that, in the questions in the poll. That is where a large section of our population lives, and that we will lose our community's investment if it's downtown. I just need to put that out there. And if that one piece of information got out to a few people right now because I said it, I feel better for saying it.
Well, and based on what Carmen said, I think that there has to be a delineation in the poll between Empire and John Toppett's Park, because I think that the park specifically was the frustrating point. It wasn't necessarily placing it in Empire, so that will have to be very clear.
Well, we made that crystal clear for you, Nicole.
I still think we have your consensus
No, I
to
think
know
you do.
next steps.
I think we gave you some direction.
Yes.
All right.
We haven't solved the problem. We just have a path forward.
Very well put. Anyone else? Anyway, I want to thank you, everyone, for coming. Yes.
I have one more thing, since we're talking about the library. The library steering committee was interested in getting an update on the situation with the HVAC system in the library.
Okay.
I don't have that, but I would be happy to get that for you.
For those of you that don't know, the HVAC system in the library is not working at all right now, and it's my understanding it cannot be repaired because it's so old.
Can I say though, we recently thought that same thing at the History Museum and then learned that that wasn't the case, that it actually just needed to be cleaned. And so we should definitely ask those questions.
Winter is coming.
Okay. All right.
No heat in the building.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your input. And have a good evening.